Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne following his swearing in. Have a listen to our conversation. Hi, Minister. It's a pleasure to see you again, and congratulations on your new portfolio.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
I appreciate
much.
it.
A new era of fiscal responsibility in the country.
I'm glad that you're bringing that up because I have a number of questions about what exactly that means. But I want to start off on the premise of your government now backing away from the carbon tax. You stood alongside former Prime Minister Trudeau for years in cabinet as a parliamentary secretary defending the premise behind the carbon tax. Why should Canadians believe you now that you're really not going to use it?
Well, the Prime Minister signed an order today. You've seen that. But I would say the worst thing we could do is not to change our approach when the world is changing. The world has changed massively in the last 6 weeks. I mean, you've seen our closest ally and partner turn its back on us. Geopolitics is changing. So in line of the change in the world, I think Canadians expect us to be pragmatic. You look at what you were doing. We're still very committed to do a number of things for climate change. I still believe this is really the issue of our generation, of our lifetime. But at the same time, there's different ways to do things. I think the Prime Minister spoke during the campaign, and today he signed an order. But I would say it's just a reflection of how we have to adapt to a fast-changing world. People at home understand how things have changed in 6 weeks. It's almost unprecedented. So we're pragmatic. We're changing our approach. We still focus on reducing carbon. But at the same time, we're taking a different approach.
I guess with all due respect, though, I would ask, didn't Canadians want you to be pragmatic 6 months ago or a year ago? Is this just a naked political decision to remove this issue as a point of cleavage between the Conservatives and yourself?
I would say the world has changed. Let's not forget,
about a carbon tax?
Well, I think the world in general. 6 weeks in this world has seen unprecedented position taken by one of the superpowers, which happens to be our closest ally and neighbor, which is really reshaping the world order like we have not seen in our lifetime. So in line of these changing environment, you really have to see how do you maintain competitiveness in Canada? How do you respond to the concern about affordability that Canadians have put?
But shouldn't you have been doing that before?
Well, I would say the last 6 weeks is really, I know you would keep asking me that, but I would just say, look around the world. 6 weeks. 6 weeks has changed the world significantly. And I would say in that context, I think folks at home would understand that the worst we could do is not to acknowledge that the world is changing and just say, well, because we decided one day to do this, we're not going to change. No, I think to be clever is to look and say, well, the world is changing. We have to adapt, keeping with our value about, protecting climate and making sure that we have policies to reduce carbon emission, but at the same time also understanding that now is the time to act to support Canadians.
Speaking of change and in different framing, you mentioned you started off, you're the finance minister now, you talked about fiscal responsibility. And I'm hoping that you can help me understand the math, because during the leadership campaign, Prime Minister Carney talked about maintaining transfers to individuals and provinces, keeping dental care, pharmacare, child care, accelerating defense spending, yet somehow balancing the budget in a three-year time frame. How does that add up? And what are you going to cut to get there?
We're going to do things differently. Like I said, it's a new era of fiscal responsibility. This is a completely new era in Canada. We have been clear, we're going to spend less, we're going to invest more. We're going to build Canada of tomorrow. There's nothing that you will see that will surprise Canadians that at a time like that, we need to invest massively in ourselves, in our industries, in our defense, in our industries across the nation and workers. So we're going to say there's a difference between spending and investment. So that's going to be the first frame we're going to present to Canadians, that, for example, when you have structural investment that are going to make our country more competitive, we're going to present a financial statement, if you want, where you will see the spending and the investments. And I think folks at home understand, when you go to the grocery and buy, you're spending. When you invest in a house, when you buy a house, you're investing.
It's still a debt load to me, though. Both of those things weigh on my debt load.
One is that you're buying an asset that is going to be there for generations. I'll give you an example. When we have the high-frequency rail now, or the high-speed rail, well, that's an asset we're going to have for at least 100 years, if not beyond, like when we built this railway across Canada. So now is the time to invest in ourselves. If our largest trading partner is turning its back on us, we're gonna invest in our industry. We're gonna use the money to rebuild our military, but we're gonna do that with Canadian workers and Canadian industry. There's nothing that we cannot do for ourselves that someone can take away from us. And I think this is going to be a new paradigm for Canadians to see that we're going to insist, for example, that people use Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, that we're going to use our dollar to really support Canadian industry at a time where we've never seen a challenge, I would say, of that magnitude. And I think I am a firm believer this is going to become one of the most resilient economy of the G7. What we need is to raise the level of ambition in this country. We need to be the most ambitious country. We have natural resources, we have talent, we have critical minerals, we have energy. We are the only country in the G7 with a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. Listen, we have more than most countries in the world, and that is going to be the foundation for our success.
Even if I accept the framing that you're positioning versus investment versus spending, program spending has accelerated under your government's watch. What will you, to be blunt, spend less on? Because nobody has been explicit about how you're going to accomplish fiscal responsibility.
Well, as you know, this is hours since I've been
I know, but you're here. I got to ask.
I appreciate
and the campaign went on for 6 weeks.
I'm sure we'll have other opportunities to be together. It seems it's been hours since I've been sworn in as the Finance Minister of Canada. But in my mind, there is a frame which is different. There's like the operating budget and there's the capital investment. And this is a time, I believe, like I would say most Canadians believe, this is the time to invest in ourselves, to do big leap forward, to make sure that, we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about quantum, we talk about microchip, we talk about our steel and aluminum industry, our forestry industry, for example, in our agriculture, to be we don't need to rely on so many other nations. So we're going to be doing things like food security, energy security, economic security. That's all part of national security. So in my view, this is a great time to invest. And I think we're going to do that. We're going to be working with our colleagues at the provincial level. But this is really the frame. You spend less, you invest more. And I think that's
But what are you spending less on? And I take it that you're just new to the job. But Mr. Carney has made this a central plank of not only his leadership campaign, but what he said after his swearing in as well. Priority 2 will be to grow the economy and spend less, he said explicitly.
Totally.
Canadians would ask me to ask Conservatives who present the same position, the same question. Well, what are you going to cut back on that I rely on at this moment in time?
Well,
the math doesn't add up.
I think it's a very different frame. One is one of negativity. When you've heard the Conservatives, it's all about negative thing. I'm talking about an ambitious Canada, about a Canada that invests in itself, that is going to make significant change to prepare our economy for one of its biggest challenge in our century.
But you're both talking about fiscal responsibility.
Listen, and we're going to be transparent. We're going to work with the parliamentary budget officer when it comes to what goes in expenses, what goes in investment. We're going to be very transparent with Canadians. But the message today is that this is a kind of a reset in a way. We are saying this, it's an era of fiscal responsibility where we're going to invest in ourselves. And honestly, I just came from Washington yesterday. I would say it's in our nation interest to take care of ourselves. We're not going to depend on others. We're going to make sure that we are resilient. But this level of ambition that you saw today, not only in cabinet, but when we have a new leader, this needs to be something that we see across the factory floors, the unions, Canadians of all walks of life. This is like a national moment where we see this needs to be more than a moment. This needs to be a movement. In line of adversity, we need to invest. And that is going to make sure that we come out of that stronger, I would say more resilient, and certainly, prepared for whatever may comes next. That's what we need to do now.
And I think, I'm not taking away from that message. I think the message of ambition is one Canadians share, particularly at this moment of time. And the impetus for it could not be more crystal clear, thanks to what's unfolded after the last 6 weeks. But Mr. Carney has said, I'm going to spend less. You have said, I'm going to spend less. You can't answer on what you're going to spend less on. Is it the public service? Are you going to cut the public service?
Like I said, we're 6 hours since the moment I've been sworn in. So
in principle, are you open to cutting the public service?
Listen, I love the public servant. I think they've done great service for Canadians. We're going to look at the books. We're going to be, it's more about the approach. When I say this is the era of fiscal responsibility, I think people understand what it means. We're going to be looking. I'm going to be like a hawk in the spending to make sure that whatever we have to do to protect the country. On the other end, I'm very much focused on the other side of the equation, which is the investment, because, you either spend less or you invest more at the same time to grow the economy. So my mission is to make sure that we build the economy for resiliency, to have a strong economy. And the Prime Minister said the strongest economy of the G7. So I've never been more confident. Honestly, despite adversity, I think we're going to come out of that stronger than ever.
Okay, I have just a few seconds left. I wanted to ask you about that meeting.
Yes.
Do they want to reopen the USMCA immediately?
Well, we have said to them that we're going to be ready to do that. But yesterday was really a moment where we went there, first of all, to lower the temperature. I think you've heard Premier Ford saying that. I think it was needed. At the same time, I said that might be an opportunity for reset in Washington, in how you approach Canada. It needs to be on the basis of respect. We're a big nation, we're a G7 nation, we're a NATO country. If you want to engage with Canada, our workers deserve respect, our industry deserves respect, our country deserves respect. And lastly, I'd said, I made sure that at least I presented the Canadian view to say, you ought to be careful. I was saying to them, uncertainty cannot become the new certainty. Just look, the markets have spoken. There's like $4 trillion of dollar, which has, the markets have lost in the last few weeks. Industry has spoken, and union leaders have spoken. Because what you're doing, you're undermining North America competitiveness. And I say, if national security and that great vision of the president, Canada is your best friend. We can do that together. We can become, as an integrated North American powerhouse, but you have to treat us with respect, and we're going to stand firm. They understand that. They don't always like what we said, for sure, but one thing they know is that with this Prime Minister, we're going to stand strong, we're going to be firm, and we're going to defend every single workers and industry in this country.
I will leave it on that.